Hey there, guys. Mr. Remedies back with another reading lesson. Today, we're continuing to explore some big ideas in the world of reading, in the world of literature. Yesterday, we talked about how every author has a purpose. Today, we're talking about how every story has a message. All right. As always, we have some learning goals and success criteria, so let's get to those now. Our learning goal today is that we are learning to infer messages in works of fiction. Okay, infer, always a big word when it comes to reading and literature. Our success criteria, we only have two today, is I can define message and I can use text evidence to make inferences. Okay, so we want to be able to use what's in the text to kind of infer what the message is. Boom, you're going to be experts at it today. So let's move on to our singular vocabulary word today. That vocabulary word is the word message. And when we talk about message in reading, we're talking about the fact that the message is what the author wants the reader to learn or take away from the text. So after we're done reading, whether that's a chapter or whether that's a story as a whole, there's something that we should have learned, or we should be considering, or we should be taking away from the story, okay? And so I really encourage you guys to start thinking about that, okay? Because I'm going to ask you to think about it today. Boom, see how that works? All right, let's dive into an example from one of our awesome read-alouds. All right, our first example comes from a book that we read way back in the fall. We're talking about The Other Side. What happens in this story? I bet if you think back, this was a long time ago, but this was such an impactful story. Remember that there are two girls of different races that live next to each other during segregation, during the time where different races had to be separated. They do not play together due to a fence separating the town. Then one of the girls stands on the fence and watches her neighbors play. One of those girls starts to sit on the fence with her, and they become friends, while that girl's sisters refuse to come and play with the girl. By the end of the story, though, eventually all the girls sit on the fence together and become friends. Right? Fantastic story. So many things we could learn. I don't even know where to begin, but we're going to try. So, when a teacher, or when we start to think about what is the author's message, what does the author want me to learn from this story? What do they want me to take away from it? You have got to ask yourself, what did the characters learn? We've talked a lot about how characters in stories should be somewhat like us, okay? Characters in stories often help us understand the story better. Okay, so if we start to think to ourselves, well, if I'm like the characters, maybe I'm out there in Carbons Cove, Texas. You're young people, so these two girls are young, so you have some similarities. I want to always ask myself, what did the characters learn? Okay, once that you identify that, then you have gone a long way to identifying the author's message. So in The Other Side, the author's message is to not be afraid. Don't be afraid to make friends with people who look different than you. But there's also a second message. The color of someone's skin does not matter. And that change happens little by little, one person at a time. Okay? So in this book, the author has a purpose, right? They also have a message, but boom, excellent skill. They have more than one message. There's multiple things we can learn or take away from this story. Okay. Let's move on to another example that I know you guys are going to just rock and roll with this message business. So we're moving on to The Boy and the Whale. Very short story, but wonderfully written, beautifully drawn. Let's think about what happens in this story. Remember, a fisherman and his son spot a whale trapped in their net. Then they think the whale is dead, but it isn't. However, the father is only concerned about his ruined net. Okay? he doesn't show a whole lot of concern for the whale at all. He's just really worried about how his net is ruined and what effects that'll have on his family. But by the end of the story, the fisherman and his son return to shore, and while Papa goes to find a new net, the son goes back to the whale and cuts away the net, freeing it. Even though Papa isn't really thrilled about the fact that he disobeyed him. Right? So again, when we talk about the author's message, boom, what does the author want me to learn from reading this story? Okay? And what did the characters learn? Did the boy learn anything? Did Papa learn anything? Did the whale learn anything? Maybe so. But, once we read that, we're able to decide that. What did the characters in the story learn? Because if they learn something, it's a good chance that I'm going to learn the same thing. Okay? So the author's message for The Boy and the Whale, I believe, is that it is important to help the animals that are in danger. That sometimes what seems to be impossible is possible if you try. The father kind of gives up and doesn't want to save the whale because it would be too much work. So yeah, that's a great lesson. I really like that one. Boom, that's a great lesson. Sometimes what seems impossible is possible if you try. And if you listen to your heart and do what you think is right, okay, then maybe some things will shake out for you, okay? And that is a skill that we learn as we grow up, and that's a very important message to learn as well. All right, let's move on to our third and final one from an oldie but a goodie. We're moving right on to The Junkyard Wonders. Man, Mr. Remedies, I believe I read this one on our interactive read aloud way back when everybody was first introduced to fourth grade. So let's refresh our memory. What happens in this story? I bet you guys remember this because it was a fantastic story. Right? A young girl named Trisha moves to a new school and is put into a class full of quote-unquote weird kids. Right? The teacher, Mrs. Peterson, puts them into tribes where they do many class projects over the year. During these projects, the kids begin to realize they have talents and they build friendships. And by the end of the story, you actually find out that these kids grow up to do amazing things, like being an artist and working with NASA, some super awesome things. Okay? So again, we're trying to establish and try to identify what is the author's message. What does the author want me to learn? What do they want me to learn? We got to learn something. That's the amazing thing about reading. Thinking to myself, what did the characters learn? Helps me understand what the author's message is. We know that they learned that it is okay to be different. Each one of the characters was very unique in their own, in a very very memorable way. Everyone has special talents, and all people are geniuses in their own unique way, which is one of the reasons I love that story so much. It teaches us so much about accepting others and about accepting ourselves and really believing in ourselves. Right? Now that we have that out of the way, 3 great examples of how author's message really can be multiple things. There's more than one message in most stories, and I just think it's absolutely important to understand author's message. All right. As a review, and I come into your screen as a review, each story has a message, each and every one of them. An author does not write a story without knowing what their message is going to be. Okay? The author's message is what they want you and I, as the reader, to learn from the story. Stories can have many messages. In each one of our examples, we had at least 3 messages. Okay? And what's really amazing, a little secret time, readers can have different opinions about what the message is. And that all comes down to like our personal experience when we read. Okay? And you know what? When people have different opinions, that's okay. It's okay to have different opinions. Right? So, author's message, the message of the story, super important skill to have, whether we're reading biographies, whether we're reading fantasy novels, or whether we're reading humorous novels, or whether we're reading graphic text. Ultra important, okay? You guys have absolutely rocked it. I know you're out there across Copper's Cove, just absolutely just knocking this out of the park, right? And we're going to try to encourage you guys to apply this, to use these skills when you read any text from here on out, all right? As always, you know who I am. I'm Mr. Remedies. You guys have been amazing, and we will see you next time.